Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst for 22nd October 2024, where we will be discussing 7 most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. In the very first section of this discussion, we will be starting with 2 articles where we will be analyzing them in great detail. We will be starting with the recent India and China disengagement talks on the border front and the various aspects related to the same. In the next article of the analysis portion, we will be discussing about the global biodiversity framework and how there have been various issues and what are the various way forward that we should be keeping in mind. In the second part, we will be looking into 5 more articles which are extremely important for the prelims 2025 examination, where we will be discussing each of these articles in greater detail for the prelims examination which is upcoming soon. So, stay tuned. So, students, in this very first article, we will be looking into a major development that took place in our border management area. So, recently India and China reached a deal in easing the LAC tensions, that is a line of actual control tensions that India was having with China for a long period of time. And this is actually also coming at the back hill of our Prime Minister's visit to Russia for the BRICS summit, where the Chinese premier will also be present, and it is also rumored that the two leaders will be speaking to each other and will be trying to solve out many of the issues that the two countries are having. So that is why we have to understand that this development is extremely important. Well, we have to focus on this particular prelims aspect. We have to understand the various current events of national and international importance, where a little bit of mapping of the various places involved here is important. Next, in GS2, we have to understand India and its neighborhood relations is also very important for our portions of the syllabus. Now, when we look at this background of this issue, first we have to understand that India and China is having a shared border of around 3488 kilometers, which is spread across, say, the western sector, the middle sector, and the eastern sector of stretching across India and China border. Now, we have to understand that border management in Indian context, it itself very complex, right? India is having various amounts of border disputes with Nepal, with Pakistan, with China, with reference to various other countries also. But we have to understand it is China and the border issue here which is very important for India, because you have to understand India and China, they are kind of, say, very close economic competitors. We are not only close with reference to our borders, we are also close economic competitors, where we have seen that India and China are always locked in a battle to win in various parts of our economic race, of our, say, various aspects of the economy all around the world. And that is where we have to understand that China tries to counter various countries, particularly those countries where China see say various amounts of competition, such as India, and China always tends to be aggressive with them, be it India, be it the various other countries in the South China Sea, right? China is trying to combat not only, say, economically but also militarily with reference to these particular countries. And this has been the sentiment of China ever since its formation, right? Now, when we talk about what are the major factors due to which we have various border issues, one of the very first reason is the British colonial era policies. And when we talk about policies, it is the British policy on the border management, right? We have had various, say, agreements, pacts, deals with various regional empires in Nepal, in Tibet, in various other parts of the, say, neighborhood. But those deals and those agreements were not very clear. Most often they were not even documented, and this is actually one of the reasons why these issues are continuing till date. In fact, when India and Tibet, or say British India and Tibet, back in 1914 agreed, right, on this particular McMahon line, demarcating this area of say Arunachal Pradesh and Northeast India borders, right? We have to understand that even right now China does not accept it. Right? China says that Tibet was never independent, and if Tibet was never independent, how can Tibet enter into agreement with India with reference to McMahon line? So this is where China claims entire Arunachal Pradesh even right now. Well, this is a very foolish claim on their part. Next, when we talk about the post-independent era, right, while India just became independent, while in the very formative years, India and China shared a good amount of relationship, good amount of friendship. But over a period of time, due to no clear demarcation of the borders, right, the relations deteriorated rapidly, which culminated ultimately in 1962 Sino-Indian War. And we know that this war led to the loss of more than 1,000 Indian lives, right, where China majorly inched ahead of India in this particular battle. And it is when here China came to dominate the Aksai Chin area of India here, right. So Aksai Chin was a strategic corridor linking Xinjiang province of China, right, with Western Tibet. And this is when, after the ceasefire of 1962, right, we have to understand China did not vacate Aksai Chin. It is still there at this particular place. And when this ceasefire boundary was demarcated, this ceasefire boundary came to be known as the line of actual control. And there we have to understand this conflict did not end. It took place again in 1967, in 1975 with reference to various border issues. Recently in 2017, we have had the Doklam crisis at Sikkim, right? And also June 15, 2020, during the COVID pandemic, we have also this Ladakh confrontation where we all know about the infamous Galwan Valley conflict, right? Now here, we have to understand some of the reasons as to why China becomes so much aggressive with reference to India, particularly at this particular front, right? Now, the very first reason is that with time, India has been building some of the important infrastructure along India's borders with China, be it Arunachal Pradesh, be it Ladakh, be it the various other parts of the Indian borders with China. India has been extensively investing not only in building better roads, better bridges, but also improving the military infrastructure along the borders. And this is what China is afraid of, that if India is trying to better its infrastructure, then maybe Chinese assets across the borders will be compromised. Next, China also believes in this philosophy of coercion, that China believes that if China can easily exert some military force or some of the various other economic impacts on India, maybe India will be forced to go and beg to China, right? This is exactly what China believes in, not only with reference to India, but with reference to the rest of the world. China has found a newfound power with reference to its economic dominance across the various supply chain of the rest of the world, with reference to various goods and services, electronic items, and so on. So China believes that maybe if it becomes violent, if it tries to confront other countries, maybe those countries will be listening to China and their demands. But again, this is actually another reason why Chinese claims are totally baseless. Next, China also does something which wolves does, right? We have seen in various cartoons or maybe in some movies that whenever in a particular area one wolf tries to howl very loudly, the other wolves also try to follow, right? They also try to respond. This is exactly what China does. With reference to any international criticism on any Chinese actions, what they do is that the Chinese diplomats, the ambassadors, the various public representatives, the government representatives of China abroad, they all start to defend China on various social media platforms, on interviews and so on. This is what we know as wolf warrior diplomacy. Next, China also tries to blackmail various countries. For example, China gives various debt to many countries, right? And this is where these blackmailing tendencies come, that if I am applying pressure in your Ladakh area, you have to relax some of the various concessions in favor of me, that is China. So this is what we have to understand. China also uses this kind of leverage. But broadly, we have to also understand the various Chinese ambitions in this particular area of Aksai Chin. China tends to build proper amount of infrastructure that goes along Aksai Chin with reference to the Belt and Road Initiative, right? And with reference to various other infrastructure where China wants to reconstruct the Silk Route that existed before, right? So this is where we have to understand China has these various ambitions to connect itself with reference to Central Asia, with reference to Europe later. And this is where we have to understand India's sovereignty is also compromised if Chinese ambitions are this, malicious. So this is why we have to understand that recent India and China agreement with reference to this particular area becomes extremely important. In this particular agreement, we had the expansion of the patrolling arrangements, right, that included the Demchok and the Depsang areas too. As we can understand, these are the Depsang plains, and these have been at the heart of the Galwan Valley crisis here. So this particular matter, when it is kind of being solved between the two countries, is actually good progress going forward. Next, you have to understand that according to our Foreign and External Affairs Ministry, right, he is telling that this particular agreement brings back this status quo or the state of affairs of this particular crisis back to 2020, when the Indian army and the Chinese army will also be brought back to the places back when they actually were at 2020, right? And also diplomatic and military negotiations would be continuing as usual with reference to solving the various other pending issues in this particular sector. So it is actually a good sign that the two countries are kind of coming to the table and kind of ironing out their issues, right? But we have to understand that India cannot be kind of dependent on this kind of unilateral agreements and deals, right, which take place after a long string of negotiations at the diplomatic level, at the military level. India on its own also has been doing some activities to establish itself in this particular sector, in this particular area of this water. Firstly, India has been part of various global strategic alliances, be it the I2, U2, be it the Quad, right, be it various other strategic alliances. Now, can you in the comment let me know two other international strategic alliances which India is part of, where the US is present, right, where majority of the Western countries are present to reflect the broader Chinese aggression, right? So this is where India is also trying to find good alliances. Next, India is also formulating a policy which is known as necklace of diamonds, where India is trying to have various collaborative policies with countries such as Mongolia, Iran, Oman, and various island nations in the Indian Ocean such as Seychelles, Singapore. We have Vietnam, Japan, where India is trying to encircle China, as we can see here, right, and kind of trying to build a good and comprehensive amount of supply chain of goods and services to totally de-link India from China, right. Next, India is also trying to boost up its border infrastructure and also the infrastructure of various other neighborhood nations such as Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, even Myanmar, and also the various border states, right? As we have seen with reference to recent times, we have various amounts of tunnels, bridges, which have been built to improve the border resilience of India. Next, we also have various cooperation with neighbors, such as building dams in Nepal, or having a good amount of comprehensive treaties with Bhutan to improve its infrastructure and also train its military and various other aspects. So India is also trying to boost its cooperation with its neighbors. But we have to understand there are some challenges and kind of uncertainties with this particular a deal and agreement which was reached. Firstly, we have to understand there is a lack of clarity on the buffer zones that India and China would be following in this particular border sector, right? This particular clarity has not been given by the press conference. Next, there is also skepticism about the implementation of this particular agreement. We can all try to sign on flashy deals and so on, but we have seen with reference to this sector, the major issue has been the implementation, right? And we have to understand it has been China who have been kind of not implementing the various border agreements. So this is where there are some kind of skepticism. Next, there are also domestic political reactions, which according to various experts may not be very feasible, that can come from China, right? We have various media houses, we have various political experts in China who would not see this as a good development, right? And that is why we have to understand there are some criticism in this particular aspect. And finally, we cannot forget China's broader strategic ambitions. That is the BRI initiative, or the various amounts of, say, domination over economic spheres, right? Having huge amount of trade deficits with various countries. So we have to understand that this is just a small achievement in actually countering China. And we have to understand this in particular aspect of India's broader border management issues. We have had various, issues at the Indian borders here with our various neighbors. Mainly, the main reasons are firstly the difficult terrain. According to the various, say, parts of our country, we have to understand the mountainous regions, the various amounts of forested regions present various border management challenges. Next, we have had hostile issues. We have Pakistan, we have China, we have various these kind of neighbors who do not, say, sit at peace and always try to create some trouble. Next, we have various borders and illegal activities such as the various amounts of drug trafficking, so human trafficking that takes place along the borders of Myanmar, right? And also we have had various political and diplomatic challenges. For example, say the diplomatic issue with Nepal, which is a kind of an ongoing issue, right? With reference to even here, the border issue here, right? We have had various, political issues and diplomatic issues with Sri Lanka too in the past. So we have had, broader border management issues, particularly in this particular aspect. So mainly the way ahead is that we must be trying to improve the technological advancements. We must be trying to install various amounts of, say, sensitive equipments. We can involve satellites, we can involve various amounts of radars to actually surveil the border in a good spirit. Next, we must be also establishing good amount of diplomatic channels and confidence building measures between the various countries, and we also should be having better amount of training and, say, capability utilization of the specialized border forces. Now in the comment section, can you let me know the names of 2 specialized border forces that India is having, and also engaging the various border communities and improving their economic status so that they can be actually one of the most important weapons in countering the external aggressions. Now here we have a question from UPSC Mains PYQ 2016 that border management is a complex task due to difficult terrain and hostile relations with some countries. Elucidate the challenges and strategies for effective border management. Now in the comment section, you let me know what we must be doing as a nation for effective border management. So this will be a practice of our answer writing skills. Apart from this, we also have this PYQ from 2020 prelims where we have to actually understand the location of this particular, say, sector of the Ladakh border issue with China. Now please let me know the answer of the same in the comments below. In the next article, we'll be looking into the status of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And also according to this article, we have to understand the governments all around the world have missed deadlines on biodiversity action plans, and funding for conservation is actually billions of dollars behind. So this is actually one of the most important treaties when it comes to the conservation of wildlife, of biodiversity, of flora and fauna all across the world. So when it comes to the implementation of this particular treaty, of this particular framework, it is lacking behind. And when we talk about our syllabus, it is very important for prelims where we have to discuss about the various general issues on environmental ecology, biodiversity and climate change. We have to also look at this from the lens of GS3, conservation, environmental pollution and degradation. Now, starting this article, firstly we have to understand what is the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Now, this is actually a framework which was agreed upon at the COP or Conference of Parties 15 at the Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, CBD or Convention on Biological Diversity was actually an output of the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. Now in the comment section, can you let me know 2 other products or byproducts of this Rio Earth Summit? Now here we have to understand that this particular framework is giving the entire world 23 targets. 23 targets for what? 23 targets generally divided into 3 broader topics of reducing threats to biodiversity, meeting human requirements through sustainable use of the ecosystem as a whole, and tools and solutions for implementation and mainstreaming, generally by funding or, say, supplying various technologies by the developed countries to the developing countries to improve the biological diversity aspect in the entire world, right? And these targets must be achieved by 2030. What are the key provisions? That is, a very important goal, that is 30 by 30, that is achieving the protection of, say, the degraded lands, of, say, the biodiversity of the various waters and lands all across the world by 2030. That is a global target that all of the countries must be taking to conserve 30% of the global lands, waters, degraded lands by 2030. Next, the countries must also be establishing national biodiversity strategies and action plans. That is the various national plans to protect the biodiversity and the various applications and the various aspects of ecosystem in their countries. Next, $200 billion per year for conservation initiatives must be given, where we have to understand $20 billion per year by 2025 must be contributed by the developed nations. Next, the big companies must be filing reports on the various impacts on biodiversity that arises due to their business, due to their various obligations. Next, the various subsidies and the various government programs that deplete biodiversity must be identified and possibly also must be eliminated by 2025, right? Also, we have to understand the amount of pesticides that is used all across the world. They are actually polluting the world at a very global level. So they have to also be eliminated or reduced by almost half, right? And finally, the progress of the implementation or various of adopting the 23 targets must be monitored and reported on the international platform every 5 years, right? And we have to understand this particular global biodiversity framework was a product of the COP15, and the COP16 will be the first biodiversity COP since the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and this is actually taking place at Cali in Colombia. And we have to understand firstly some of the challenges, right, since COP25 and the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Firstly, we have to understand only 31 out of 195 countries had submitted the national plans for protecting the biodiversity. Mainly, we have to understand it is actually the developing nations who actually are facing the various financial issues and the technical issues or the technical expertise in implementing the biodiversity framework. We have to understand the Western nations or the developed nations, they have the funds, they have the technical expertise to implement the various aspects of this particular thing. But we have to understand the developing countries are lagging behind. Next, the countries are also not finding an answer of how to fund the ambitious biodiversity goals, because we have to understand as of 2022 only $15.4 billion have been collected for this particular entire program. The Global Biodiversity Framework Fund raised only $238 million so far, not billion dollars, right? $billion were actually the target, so we have to understand only around $238 million have been raised. Next, the developed nations and also having various issues at their end, right? They are not increasing the funding, as we have seen, right, with reference to the contribution of $20 billion fund every year, which they are not doing so. They are also not passing on the technical expertise that the developing countries need for the particular matter, right? And also we have to understand the US is actually not a part of the CBD, right? So this is actually also one of the main issues where actually the world's most important country is also not part of this particular framework. Next, we also have various interconnected crises according to the IPCC report. According to IPCC, these are known as the tipping points or the various degraded and sensitive areas with reference to climate change all across the world. Be it the Amazon rainforest where frequent droughts are taking place, or the Arctic sea ice where we have reduction in area due to a global ice melting, right? Be it the boreal forest, be it the coral reefs which are dying off. We have to understand that the world is facing this amount of various issues with reference to climate change, and each and every aspect of this particular tipping points are linked with each other, are interconnected with biodiversity loss and climate change. So this is what we have to understand, that the implementation of this particular framework is slowed down, due to which we can understand more and more interconnected crises can take place if we do not act at a rapid speed. Next, lastly we have to understand that logging, overfishing, habitat destruction, which were actually the main aspects which this particular framework tried to avoid, they have not slowed down. right? Still all across the world, these particular activities are continuing at a rapid rate. And this is where we have to understand, we have to adopt various practical suggestions. Now, firstly, we have to mobilize new funding mechanisms. As we have seen, this fund is not able to generate resources for developing nations. So maybe we can enhance our funding using green bonds, right? Using various other instruments, right? Where we can understand that the money that is being needed by the developing nations, they can be raised by various other means. We also have to boost international cooperation and technological transfer with reference to various countries. Next, we must be also trying to prioritize our biodiversity objectives in our national policies, such as reforestation, afforestation, wetland preservation, aquaculture, and various other, say, agroforestry aspects, natural farming, to actually build upon the national policies to protect the biodiversity in the country, right? We also have to improve the national accounting and the reporting standards, where the main, say, initiatives that maybe India is taking, they have to be reported somewhere, right? So we have to also understand the same reporting standards must be present for China, must be present for Bolivia, Colombia, and so on, so that their individual national, say, policies and their performance can be tracked on a global portal and they can be reported transparently. There can be also community-based conservation efforts at the grassroots level, because we have to involve the local people, the NGOs, the tribal populations, and the various indigenous sections of the populations to actually conserve the biodiversity. Next, we also have to address various sectoral issues, such as various amounts of agricultural expansion that is eating into Amazon rainforest and causing biodiversity loss there. We have to also address the industrial pollutions and the chemical pollutions which are causing river pollution, which is causing, say, further injection of chemicals into water bodies and finally into the global oceans and seas. So we must be addressing these issues, particularly in COP16. Next, we must be also trying to leverage innovation, where we have to use better amount of tools such as AI, such as satellites, such as remote sensing, for better amount of surveillance of biodiversity loss. And also we must be trying to address these losses using innovative solutions. We can also try to use various other practical applications such as drones and trying to conserve the same. Next, finally, we have to understand to strengthen the global advocacy and diplomatic engagement. Particularly, we have to involve the Western countries in improving their funding, right? So this is what we have to understand. We have to take various steps and actions in this particular regard to be nature positive by 2030. So we have to actually be nature positive. We have to save our biodiversity. We have to protect our nature in this particular manner. And in this particular aspect, there is a practice question for all of you, that the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was a landmark agreement to reverse nature's destruction by 2030. Highlight the goals and challenges associated with this framework. Now, in the comment section, you give me a very brief and structured answer so that we can have a better amount of peer review in the comment section. Now, moving on to the next article. In the next article, it is a very important editorial on the importance of the constitution in the country. Now, it is very important for prelims, for our Indian polity and governance, and also for our GS2, where we have to discuss about the Indian constitution, its historical underpinnings, evolution features, significant provisions, and the basic structure. Now, firstly, when we try to understand this article, we have to understand this year, November 26, it will be the 75th year anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution of India, which is actually a very big, landmark milestone, right? And we have to understand this through the lens of a British Chief of Indian Army, who actually commented just after India's independence. He was actually very skeptical, and he said that the Sikhs may try to set up a separate regime, right? The Punjabi is different from a Madrasi, as a Scot is from an Italian. The British tried to consolidate India, but achieve nothing permanent. No one can make a nation out of, say, a continent of many nations. So this was actually the skepticism of a British, right, just after independence. But look at India right now. We have to appreciate India's unity and diversity, and also India's, say, integrity over a period of time. And also how the constitution of our country has remained resilient for 75 years. And we have to understand some of the basic features of the constitution here. That Firstly, we have to understand constitutional governance in India is not merely a facet of laws, rules and regulations that governs the, say, various establishment of democratic institutions, right? Be it the parliament, be it the judiciary and so on. It is actually also about a deep sense of constitutional culture in Indians, right? We always try to refer to our constitution as the highest value, right? And also we have to capture the collective consciousness of the Indians across various faiths, cultures and beliefs. So this particular constitutionalism in our own Indianness is actually what makes Indian constitution alive even right now. And firstly, when we have to understand UPSC syllabus, we have to look into the various basic features of our constitution, right? We know that Indian constitution is the longest written constitution in the entire world, where we have an almost approx words of around 1,44,000, right? This is an approximate number. Next, the sovereignty resides in the people. The main power from the constitution derives from the Indian people. Next, it is also drawn from various sources. Now in the comment section, can you let me know 2-3 provisions of our constitution which has been drawn from other constitutions? Next, also we have the provision of affirmative action such as reservation for the weaker sections of the populations, which is actually a very unique portion or a feature of our constitution to uphold the spirit of the various peoples of the country. Next, we also have a unique blend of rigidity and flexibility in the various constitutional provisions through the various provisions of amendments to the constitution, which make the constitution a living document. The various significant provisions of the Indian constitution are firstly the preamble of the constitution. Next, we have the fundamental rights, duties. We have the DPSPs or the various duties of the state towards the people. Next, we have a single citizen provision in the country. We also have the parliamentary form of government, the federal structure. We have an independent and integrated judiciary, which is actually a very, very important cornerstone of upholding the judicial freedom and independence in the country. We also have the provisions of universal adult franchise. You also have the local self-government, where the power is democratized and decentralized at the grassroots level. Apart from this, we also have the provisions of emergency and the special attention to scheduled areas and tribal sections, right? So these are the various significant provisions that India is having in its constitution, and this is why we have to understand there are many reasons of celebrating this particular 75 years of anniversary. First, we have to understand the people's respect for the democratic institutions. We have to understand, as of 26 November 1949, India's life expectancy was around 32 years. Right now it is 70 years. So definitely there have been some economic and social uplifting over a period of time. So this reflects that the quality of life has improved over a period of time. The social and economic development is obviously a testament to India's growth, and also the economic growth over a period of time reflects that a progressive implementation of public policy has been robust over a period of time in India's case. And also we have to understand the reason why Indians continue to participate in large and significant numbers in every elections, be the local, state or the central elections. So this actually reflects the trust that Indians have on the Indian polity and the Indian constitution at an overall level. The next reason to celebrate this 75 years is actually the idea of smooth transitions of power at the end of elections. We have to understand, since India become independent, we have our various elections and also various types of political leaders, various types of leaders with various types of ideologies at the center, at the state, at the local levels. But still we have to understand, at the end of elections, there have been always a smooth transition of power. This is not seen in most of the developing nations, such as Africa, such as Southeast Asian countries, and in various parts of Latin America too. So this peaceful transition of power is actually one of the most important things that Indians are having faith in the constitution. The third reason to celebrate is actually how the various rights and freedoms in India are protected through the various courts. And the constitution is very important in recognizing the highest degree of importance being attached to the fundamental rights and the courts, right? So over a period of time, there have been many Supreme Court cases we have seen where the fundamental rights of the individuals have been upheld over a period of time, right? Why? Because it is due to the drafting of the constitution and how the various provisions of the constitution came to being due to the various arguments, due to the provisions with reference to the fundamental rights, with reference to the constitutional assembly. Because the constitutional assembly were mindful of the power of the mighty state, because we had the imperial power of the British ruling over India for hundreds of years, and that is when the makers of the constitution, they also got to know about how brutal a state power can be. So that is why fundamental rights were given to the states, and the courts were empowered with protecting the fundamental rights. And we have to understand that the drafters of the constitution, they could easily be tilted towards the idea of a benevolent state, right? Especially when the entire first cabinet had people who were part of the freedom movement, but they did not do so. The deep skepticism of the state apparatus, right? How brutal a state can be, and a fervent commitment, that is a commitment towards protecting the individual rights and freedoms, reflected a far-sighted vision on their part. The next reason to celebrate is federalism. We have to understand India is an extraordinary diversity of various cultures, various faiths, various beliefs, linguistic diversity, and so on, right? We have to understand, to protect this amount of diversity, right, the constitution must be powerful, and thus powers must be divided between the center and the states, right? And this is where the author is also expressing that this federalism has created different forms of autonomy and special privileges for different states, keeping in mind their unique histories and the cultures. Also, the author says that over the last 7 decades, the idea of federalism has further depended on at least 2 levels. Firstly, there have been rise at state level political parties across India. Now in the comment section, can you let me know of major prominent states where there has been rise of various regional political parties, and the rise of these regional political parties have increased the clarity of the demands of these particular regions. So this has made these regions more powerful and more vocal. Second, the idea of federalism has also led to the passing of the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts, which have led to the growth of the grassroots democracy. And finally, we have to understand the role of the media and the civil society in instilling faith in our democracy, right? We have to understand that the transition of the print media to broadcast media, and finally the innovations in media and technology, have democratized access to information in the country, right? Be it the social media, be it the various other aspects of news reporting in the country, they are more democratized with reference to various smartphone usage in the country, right? Also, we have to understand, while we need to be critical of the challenges of the autonomy and the independence of the media in recent times, where we have seen there have been many issues and many allegations put on the media that it is not completely transparent, it is equally important to recognize the values of transparency that has been part of the media culture. So this was all for this article here, and after this you let me know the answer of this UPSC Prelims PYQ from 2017 in the comments below. This is linked to the things that we have just learned right now. In the next article, we'll be looking into the Morh Tunnel, which is in the news due to the shooting of the various militants in the region of Kashmir. And here we have to understand the location of the tunnel most importantly. See, this tunnel is located on the road between Kargil and Srinagar, right? And this particular portion is also having 2 amounts of tunnel. Firstly, we have the Jojira tunnel, which is around 14.15 kilometers, which is actually open all days and having all weather accessibility, right? The time of completion is around 5 years. It is expected to be completed by 2025. The other section of this particular road is having this particular tunnel, right? The Morh Tunnel, which is actually connecting the portion of National Highway 1 or the Srinagar to Leh highway, and is actually one of the only roads which is connecting Ladakh to rest of India, the other being the Manali and Leh highway, right? So this is actually a very, very important stretch of the tunnel which is actually under construction right now, and this is actually part of the larger Jojila tunnel that we have just discussed here. And we have to understand that this particular tunnel, since it is very important in connecting this entire Ladakh region to the mainland India, right? And also this is granting all weather connectivity, right? The main benefit that this tunnel is giving is to the various tourists who actually visit the Sonmarg region, and also it is also trying to facilitate the various movement of troops and supplies to Ladakh. But since it is not completed as of now, and since there has been a militant attack on this particular aspect here, the potential tourists and the potential military applications will be entirely compromised. So this underscores the most important aspect and the role of this tunnel in recent times. The status of completion, as we can understand, is that as of 2012 the project was conceived by the Border Roads Organization, right? And the project was later taken over by National Highways and Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited, and later it was given to APCO Infratech, where we have seen recently there have been various killings by the militants in this particular region, hampering the development of this particular tunnel. And this was generally due to be completed in 2023 August, but it was delayed for various reasons, and again right now it is being delayed when it is almost at the verge of completion, right? And also, as we have just seen, the Jojila tunnel is actually slated for completion by 2026. So these particular tunnels are extremely important for India, for its border management and also for the facilitation of tourists and the overall development of the entire region. Now we'll be moving on to the next article. In this next article, we'll be looking into the concept of high performance building standards and how they are extremely important for achieving our climate goals. Now this is very important for our prelims when we have to understand the various issues of environmental ecology, biodiversity and climate change. Also, we have to look into GS3 aspect, where we have to look at conservation, environmental pollution and degradation, and environmental impact assessment, where we can actually quote these kinds of articles and this kind of solutions in our answers to get that one extra mark. And here, firstly, we will be understanding the concept of high performance building. See, high performance buildings are in high demand right now. Why? Because these are highly sustainable buildings which use rainwater harvesting, solar panels, which actually try to optimizing the energy efficiency by minimizing, the energy wastage by using higher amount of technology such as AI, Internet of Things, and try to conserve energy, right? They try to reduce greenhouse gases emissions, minimize energy and water use, cut operational cost using climate adaptive design, right? So these are actually very well developed and state-of-the-art buildings which are compliant with environmental practices. And beyond environmental benefits, these also have financial advantages such as enhanced property values, because any property which is having this high amount of technology, which is also green at the same time, will be having better amount of property value. They will be having lower electricity bills, lower gas bills, lower water bills, or overall lower utility bills. They will be also having access to carbon financing, because we know that as of now the green investments are on the rise, and also the building and the construction of the high performance building is classified as green investment. And if it is classified as green investment and there is a demand for these buildings, the green investments will be flowing into these buildings. And also India is also trying to start its various policy imperatives for the promotion of these high performance buildings. With reference to this, we have to first look into the various aspects or the various policies all across the world and India to promote these buildings. Now, European Union has this Green Deal, which is trying to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. And these high performance buildings are actually one of the ways in which Europe can achieve the climate neutrality, right? Apart from this, Germany has also its bank which is offering low interest rates for various energy efficient projects. According to this, Denmark is also having the same with reference to BR18 building codes. Then US is also having various programs such as Energy Star, LEED certification, where we have to understand that why all of these countries are trying to have energy efficient buildings, because the construction industry contributes to around 39% of energy related carbon dioxide emissions worldwide, which is trying to promote dangerous effects of climate change. So definitely we must be trying to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions in the construction industries altogether. So this is where this is a good alternative. And in this particular aspect, India is also supporting the construction of HPPs. How? Firstly, we have the National Action Plan on Climate Change, which is having the broader aspect on the same. Apart from this, we have the Energy Conservation Building Code developed by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which is trying to reduce the building energy demands by 30%. These targets are very important for our prelims, right? Then the Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment, or GRIHA, lists more than 3,000 registered projects as of now, which is trying to focus on resilient buildings and which are buildings which are using less amount of carbon dioxides and carbon emissions over a period of time. Next, the Indian Green Building Council, the IGBC, it is also trying to promote energy efficient buildings, which more than around 14,000 certified projects covering around 12.5 billion square foot. Apart from this, important cities such as Hyderabad, Noida and Pune, they also offer higher floor area ratios for various important commercial projects and also for residential activities, right? The Bureau of Energy Efficiency is also targeting 30% of new buildings to achieve near or say net zero status by 2030, where the net zero status means that this particular buildings will be definitely be having some carbon dioxide emissions, but they would be also be equivalently taking off this amount of carbon dioxide, maybe by reforestation, by saving energy efficiency over a long period of time. So these are the main plans here. And how these particular buildings make financial sense? Firstly, we have to understand they lead to higher energy savings. They reduce carbon dioxide emissions over a period of time at no cost, because we will be having solar panels, we'll be having better amount of say Internet of Things to minimize the energy wastage. For example, say Infosys has integrated energy efficient designs into its campuses. They use natural lighting, such as they use large windows where natural light or sunlight comes in, where they prominently do not have to use say bulbs and say various say lighting equipments, right? They are using efficient air conditioning, smart performance verification, and also this has reduced their energy consumption by 45%, which is a very good amount, right? And also we have to understand these particular buildings have higher property values due to low operating cost, smaller environment footprint, and also over a period of time, most Indians and all of the world, they are trying to become more and more environmental conscious. So this is where the high demand for these buildings are also coming from those segments. And here, how are they financed? They are financed via carbon financing, right? These are actually, by using the carbon credits, and also as we can see here, over a period of time, right? The carbon credits, which are actually the credits which are given to the various companies to say go on, say, emitting carbon dioxide emissions, but also they have a particular limit up to which they can emit these carbon dioxide emissions. After they breach this particular limit, they have to buy more carbon credits. And it is actually say due to these particular buildings, due to various other say areas from which these particular companies which actually emit a lot of carbon dioxide, they can buy the carbon credits from them. For example, say there's a particular industry which is emitting high amount of carbon dioxide. So what they can do, they can supply money to these projects and build better amount of high performance buildings, where we have to understand we have low amount of carbon dioxide emissions. So the carbon credits that they can get from here, they can actually try to say run their industrial applications, right? Apart from this, we have to also understand the concept of green bonds and climate focused funds. Green bonds are particular bonds which are focused on say mobilizing resources, money for construction of green projects, right? And after the construction of green projects and whatever the returns would be generated from the same, this would be paid back to the investors. So also, as we have seen over a period of time, green bonds have been increasing over a period of time all across the world, where in 2020 alone, right, 269 billion green bonds were issued worldwide. So let us see what would be the status of this high performance building going forward, but do not forget to include this as your mains ready point in your answer. In the next article, recently the Supreme Court told that secularism is a core part of our Indian Constitution, and this is very important for our prelims, where you have to look at Indian polity and governance. For our GS1 we have to look at secularism, and for our GS2 we have to look at the various aspects of our Indian Constitution. Now here, when we look at secularism, secularism emphasizes the separation of religion and the state and the neutrality of the government with reference to religious beliefs. And in Indian context, it generally means two aspects. Firstly, separation of religion from the state, that the state would not be supporting any one religion specifically. And second, that all religions have equal respect with reference to the state. And here we have to understand our Indian constitution has many articles, has many constitutional aspects with reference to promoting secularism in the country. We have Article 14, which is providing equality before the law and equal protection of law, which is having the aspect of secularism, which is trying to give equal respect to all religions by the state. We have Article 16, subclause 1, where we have guarantee of equal opportunity to all citizens, irrespective of, say, race, sex, caste, religion, place of birth, residence, and so on. We also have Article 25, 26, 27, 28, which is trying to aspect or grant religious freedom in the country, right? Where it provides freedom of conscience, it provides, say, the religious groups with reference to various rights, right? With reference to Article 29 and 30, we have the various cultural and educational rights to various minorities. We have Article 51A of our fundamental duties, which is giving an obligation to the citizens to promote harmony and to actually promote brotherhood between the society, and also to preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. We also have the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976, which includes the word secular in the preamble. And this is actually a very, very important aspect of this particular topic here. Apart from this, the judiciary has also evolved secularism in the country. Firstly, via the Keshwananda Bharati 1973 case, where secularism was held at the basic structure of our constitution. In the next case, S.R. Bomai versus Union of India 1994, secularism is actually being promoted as, the state giving equal respect to all religions, right? So this is how we have to understand the concept of secularism. And recently, Supreme Court again, reformed that particular aspects. Firstly, we have to understand that Supreme Court was actually hearing a batch of petitions by former Rajya Sabha member Subramaniam Swamy, right, where he particularly alleged that the word secular and socialism, they should not be included in the preamble to the constitution. But the Supreme Court replied that the court has in a number of judgments previously, as we have also seen here, right, held that secularism was always a part of the basic structure of the constitution. And the word fraternity is used in the constitution. That is a clear indication that secularism has been held as a core feature of the constitution. So the word fraternity is actually trying to promote the universal brotherhood between the particular members of our society. So in itself, it means that we are trying to promote secularism. And this is what we have to understand. Supreme Court is also trying to affirm the same. On the socialism aspect, Supreme Court has told that socialism can also mean that there should be equality of opportunity and the wealth of the country should be trying to distribute it equally between the people. So this is not always that we have to go by Western aspects of socialism. We have to also understand the Indian aspects of socialism, that we have to take everyone together and we have to reduce inequality in the country. Now looking at the history a little bit, right? Preamble was amended, as we have seen, in 1976 in the previous slide, where the words socialist and secular was introduced. The phrase unity of the nation was replaced with the unity and integrity of the nation also. So let this also be a very, very important fact for all of you, because these things can be asked in the prelims examination. Now with this, we'll be moving on to our last article. In this article, recently, our Union Communication Minister have actually tried to delineate the satellite spectrum via administrative allocation. So we will be understanding the ins and outs of this entire article and this issue in entirety. Firstly, this is very important with reference to prelims, general science, and also for a GS2 infrastructure, where we have to look into the various aspects of telecom infrastructure in the country. Now here we have to understand what is satellite spectrum in the very first phase. Satellite spectrum, or SATCOM is it, which is actually popularly known as, use an array of satellites in orbit to provide connectivity on the ground. As we can understand, we have various satellites in the space and various ground stations on our ground. We actually use the satellites for various purposes, right? We actually control our flights. We have various, say, public services which run on satellites, right? On the other hand, we also can use internet, right, where we can transmit internet from the ground station to the satellites, and then the satellites can transmit this particular internet to all across the world. So this is how, this particular spectrum, right, is actually being allocated in this particular matter to the satellite here. And here, when we understand the electromagnetic spectrum, right, it is actually, we have to understand this particular part of this particular say satellite spectrum where we are actually dealing with. And for your prelims, it is very important to know actually the various progression of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? And also for your prelims, it is extremely important that we know the frequency and the wavelength broadly, right, about each and every electromagnetic, say, wave here, right? So when we talk about the satellite spectrum, right, these do not require any wires to transmit data. This is actually alternate to the ground-based communication, correct? Now here, we have to understand the two main benefits with reference to satellite spectrum and the telecom spectrum. We know about the telecom spectrum, right? We have various 2G, 4G, 5G networks which actually run on the ground stations, the ground mobile towers that we have. But here in this SATCOM, we do not have any ground stations as as a whole. We have the satellites which are transmitting the entire internet connectivity, and this is giving two main benefits. Firstly, wider coverage, right? The satellites can reach any part of the world, be it low-lying areas, be it areas affected by natural disasters and so on, right? And also, this is actually a much more resilient network because satellite connectivity cannot be, say hampered by any, say, natural disasters such as earthquakes, tsunamis or cyclones taking place on the earth, right? So this is also, which is we have to understand the main two benefits of the same. But we have to understand there is one issue, that is it is having a lower latency, or say the time that a connection can be established over a short period of time, right? Generally the time taken by, say, various connected devices on the internet to establish itself from various servers, right? So these are the very basics of SATCOM, and we have to understand that the use of satellites allows communication to reach remote locations that mobile telephony cannot reach, as we have just discussed, right? And also the size of SATCOM sectors are increasing over a period of time. It is around $2.3 billion a year, and it will be reaching $20 billion by 2028. And also India is ranked 4th in terms of investments in the sector globally. Now here, when we talk about, say, this particular news, the minister recently clarified that spectrum for satellite communication would be allocated administratively instead of auctions. That means generally for 4G, for 5G, right, we have various auctions of telecoms, because we have to understand that the key difference between the terrestrial mobile services, or say the telecom spectrum, and the SATCOM is that telecom spectrum is exclusive. That, for example, if Jio is operating this particular spectrum, or on a particular spectrum band, only Jio can be using that. But this is not the case of the satellites. Satellites do not have this exclusiveness. That is, it is non-exclusive in nature. That is, multiple satellite operators can serve on the same geographical area. And this is where we cannot say that a particular company will be using on that particular geographical area. So this is actually why, telecom spectrums can be auctioned, but this particular aspect of, say, satellite communication spectrum, they have to be administratively allocated. That is, the government itself must be allocating to various, say, service providers in that particular geography. And this is actually also managed internationally by the International Telecommunication Union, which is a very, very important specialized agency of the United Nations. In India, this is actually having the ambit under the Telecommunications Act of 2023, where under Section 4 and subclause 4 of this particular act, the telecom spectrum shall be assigned through auction except for entries listed in the first schedule, for which assignment shall be done by administrative process. That is, for the satellite communication, which is not a part of telecom spectrum, it will be administratively based, or which is actually a part of, say, the broader say allocation by the government of India to the various private entities. And here, this particular administrative process means assignment of spectrum without holding any auction, right? And also the DOT, the Department of Telecommunication has asked the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India to come with a methodology to assess the spectrum broadly. So this is where we have to also understand this particular aspect is good and important for, say, various investment opportunities for Starlink, which is actually an enterprise of Elon Musk, because Elon Musk's Starlink uses satellite communication and not mobile telephony, right? This is why the policy landscape of the country must be tilted towards administrative allocation and not via auction allocation, which Indian companies such as Jio is arguing for. So it is a welcome step that this administrative process must be there, and this is all that we need to know about this article. So I thank you very much for being a patient audience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up, and till then, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.